The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas and Herho. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom.
And Jack Barazini. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Dom. How's it going?
Great, thanks. Folks, I want to start off with we have a new sponsor for the show, and as a listener of The Secrets of Tech, you might be a developer, or you might know a developer looking for an opportunity to work for a company with a mission that matters. And Faith Life, which you've heard us talk about, are the makers of Logos Bible software, Verbum, Catholic Scripture Study software, and something they call the Integrated Ministry Platform. And they're hiring full-stack developers. Most of the positions can be worked remotely, and they offer a competitive salary and benefits. And so it's a company where employees have an average of 5 years of tenure, which, if you know anything about programming in the tech space, that's practically an eternity these days. And they are a company who they make Bible software and software for churches. Their values are compatible with most of our with the values of most of our audience here. So and they list their values on their site. Honesty, openness, and awesomeness, which is, I think, the best value that they list.
Best value.
That is awesome. The awesomeness. So to check out the open positions that they have available, go to faithlife.com/careers and make sure to tell them that you heard about it on The Secrets of Technology. So, guys, today I wanted to talk about this new phenomenon that we've been hearing about, and we talked a little bit about this before, but it's called Zoomtowns. It's kind of like Boomtowns, but it's Zoomtowns. And the idea is people are, now that so many people are working from home, and more tech companies are saying, or companies that rely on tech are saying to their employees, you can work from home indefinitely. People are starting to realize, well, okay, so I can probably do this from anywhere. So why not do this from, say, places where I vacation? So people are moving out of cities and into suburbs and even rural areas, and because cities that are under lockdown are less attractive because they have all of the expense of living in the big city and none of the perks. And so plus people have kids, learning at home too, and so they're looking for bigger homes for what they're spending. So this is kind of causing some problems for the small towns that they're moving to as well. Higher cost of living, the increasing demand on their resources. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. What do you guys think of this whole phenomenon of Zoomtowns, of people moving out of the cities, out of even the suburbs, and going remote? I kind of get the feeling I'm not exactly sure where I know what states you guys live in, but I'm not sure whether you live in urban, rural, that sort of thing. What do you guys think of this phenomenon?
I think it's going to be more than a bubble. I think that going forward, we've kind of crossed that point where you don't need to, especially if you're doing something in the tech field, like if you're a developer, you don't need to live right next to where your company is and go into work every day. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that, especially among younger people and in the tech industry. So I think this is more than just during COVID.
Yeah. What do you think, Thomas?
Yeah, I live in a suburban area of Florida, and it's pretty close to the major cities, but not close enough to bother with all the hassle of them. So, we're just outside of Tampa, so we get to go into Tampa to do anything we need to do, or drive over to Orlando, but kind of in between the two. So I see the appeal. I was really interested in reading these articles that they didn't mention the fact that a lot of these rural areas are areas where Google Fiber has been run. So the added benefit of moving to one of these areas is that you have an even better internet connection to do all the work that you're doing from home.
And less competition on it until everybody else moves out there with you.
Yeah. Well, that tends to be the problem, right?
That's one of the interesting things but like in 2019 and previously, there was actually some of these places had these big pushes to bring in more young families because they'd had such a drain toward the cities of young people. And so I'm like where I live in New England, Western Massachusetts, they'd put in this huge fiber backbone that goes, like, we have the Massachusetts Turnpike, which runs the length of the state, and they laid this huge fiber backbone in the median, literally in the median of that, all the way through the state. And all these towns, these little towns in the western part of the state, you have this great internet connection, and they've been really pushing people to move there. Same thing with Vermont, same thing with rural Maine. When people think of Maine, there's like the lower like 20% that 80% of people from Maine live in, and then there's 80% of the state is mostly empty, and so a lot of that has been pushing to bring small businesses, companies in there. And so now that people can do this, it's funny because now they're going, maybe there's too many of you. like
That's enough. Yeah. Go back.
Right. I mean, it's kind of this balance. One of the things that struck me about this is a lot of these places they're not exactly, we're not talking like rural Iowa here. Like some of the places, like in the Forbes article that we're going to link to, it lists 7 towns that exemplify Zoomtowns. And like one's a suburb essentially of New York City. It's 90 miles north of Manhattan. 90 miles is essentially a suburb of New York City if you're from the New York area. There's a place that's a suburb of Nashville, but which is probably pretty inexpensive. But it's like Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Like, come on. That's beautiful people town. I live here. I know.
Yeah.
And that's part of the thing is like this is coming from it's a certain segment of society that's able to have the luxury to go and do this.
Right.
This is not going to be everybody.
But it's also going to be a huge infrastructure shock for these areas where they're going to have to build out and they're going to essentially become a suburb or a more urban area very quickly just because they have to.
Well, that's the interesting thing is I think this is going to be going to be in places like Martha's Vineyard and Aspen and Cape Cod and these more like higher end like Tahoe and that sort of stuff, vacation meccas, because they already have infrastructure, they already have high-speed internet, and they're serving people who expect a certain amount of amenities. But I think what we'll see is, I think it's kind of like with cars. Like the luxury cars get the high tech first, and then it trickles down. I think what we could end up seeing is a trickle down into some other places like Iowa and Nebraska and in like Western Kentucky, places where there's less of a draw for the glitterati, the rich and beautiful, and more just this is a nice place, a beautiful place without all the big city nonsense that's inexpensive. And by the way, we've put in high speed internet. I think if we can get into that place, I think we'd be good.
Well, I think 2 things are going to change that, and the 2 things are we're going to talk about the space stuff later. So the Starlink, kind of high speed internet anywhere concept, and then also 5G rolling out. As the 5G technology gets cheaper, you'll be able to deploy it a lot more readily to kind of remote areas because it doesn't rely on these huge towers as much as it does a lot of smaller towers. Yes. So you can have one big tower in the area that transmits to a bunch of smaller towers in all of these neighborhoods around it. And that would be a great way to keep a lot more people connected without having to run a huge amount of infrastructure to them.
Yeah, that would be a big, because right now 5G is basically, it's 500 feet line of sight, although we talked about that in the iPhone 12 episode recently, where it's 5G is a couple years away from being really useful like that. But once it's there, it'll be fast. It'll be, you won't necessarily, we're getting to a day in the not too distant future where you won't need to have the cable company running a line into your house. Let's put it that way. That where we're actually pretty close to that now, where your phone is just as fast as your internet connection in a lot of places, even if you're on LTE. So that's true. That's true. I like the idea of sort of dispersing people into the country so that we're not all bunched up in these big cities, to sort of preserve some small towns. I think a lot of this was one of the things I always noticed growing up in the 80s was always had these news stories about these small towns, farm towns dying because the young people had no opportunities and they'd grow up and they'd move off to the big city where they could get jobs and they never came back. And maybe this is the sort of thing that turns around because with, internet jobs that are primarily internet access, active, and then being able to get nearly everything under the sun delivered to your home within 48 hours and that sort of thing. I think that could really lend itself to that. I mean, one of the things, just from my perspective personally, I would move away from the city in a heartbeat to someplace that's less expensive, that gives me a lot more land and a bigger house for less money. If I was looking at a place in Vermont that was online the other day, and I'm like, oh, I want to move into this house. It is amazing, and it's like twice the size, 3 times the size of my house, and costs the same amount as it. But I look at it and go, okay, but it's how far from every museum that we love, and how far from really cool markets. And right now we can't go to those things, but someday we will be able to do that again, and that's the tension I feel.
Well, we'll see if all that stuff ends up going online too. That's the other thing is they'll maintain the spaces, but then have an online component to it where you can do an online tour
in VR. Then
you don't have to go. Yeah, exactly.
8K VR would be awesome. I can look at the paint swirls on the Van Gogh and in closer than I can in person.
Holodecks in our houses.
Yes, the holodecks. Yes, or transporters. We'll just go the full Star Trek and have the murder machines in our house. Sorry, I have a philosophical opposition to transporters, but so all right. So Zoomtowns, they bear watching. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it. It was interesting. There were some stats on it. There was a study that's been done of these towns, and they looked at towns that had less than 25,000 people, were within 10 miles of a national park, monument, forest, lake, or river, and at least 15 miles from a census-designated urban area. And they identified 1,522 towns in America that fit that description, and then they surveyed them. So it's interesting. So that's a lot, actually, 1,522 places. Those sound like pretty awesome places to live. Like, just that description sounds pretty awesome to me. So we'll see how that goes.
I do wonder how this will affect. I've noticed this happened before, especially like you mentioned in Nashville. We had a bunch of people move in, and they bring the cost of living up. So everybody who's grown up there, especially older couples, or and like this can happen in minority neighborhoods where people come in, they buy these old houses, they fix them up, and it raises the property taxes for everyone. And you end up pricing people who've lived in these places out of living in their homes.
Yeah, they identified that as one of the key issues with a lot of these places is it raises the cost of living for the people who've lived there for generations. I saw that actually on the coast of Maine. There's a town called Camden, and my family had vacation there for more than 50 years before I was born. And it's interesting to see how it's changed over the years. It went from a fishing village, a quaint, beautiful fishing village, and it really has become this mecca for people in big yachts, and it's become this playground for the rich. And you see like super luxury cars on the roads and stuff like that. And I've heard the stories for years now of people who've lived there for all their lives who can't afford to live in that town anymore. The taxes are too high, or they just get too good of an offer. Like, I will give you $1 million for this little place because the land it sits on is so valuable. And it's like, I can't turn it down. I have no other prospects like this. I have to leave. And so the town loses that. And because in this case, they're often vacation homes, you don't have stable families living in a town, and that just it becomes a shell of itself. So I could see this being a problem for a lot of these places. Is not so much the vacation aspect, but it raises the cost of living and really strips the deep character, the generational character of the town. So it's something to keep in mind. One of the things that they're doing is I think one of the articles talked about they're helping towns develop. They're kind of developing template zoning ordinances and other types of regulations that would help the growth and managing the growth, as not stopping it, because of course you don't want to die, but you strangle you down, but you want to manage it. So that will be interesting to follow. All right, great. So before we move on to our next topic, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including this time EC, Kristen R, Aline G, Hiram G, and Todd B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So I got my two space guys on this episode this week. You guys are my space pals, because when it's space news, I know it's Thomas and Jack. So let's talk some space news, because there's been some big space news this week. Let's start. It really has. Let's start with maybe I guess the big one. There was another headline I saw about something like a big crack forming in the moon, and maybe something was hatching. But let's not go there. It's a bad Doctor Who episode. No, but this one is NASA announced this week that water on the moon is more ubiquitous than they previously imagined. What do you guys think of this? Did you see what they were talking about?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's surface level water, which is something that we didn't think, especially surface level water on the sun side of the moon. So in case you don't know, there is actually a light side and a dark side of the moon. So there's a side that's always facing the sun, and that's why we always see the same side when it's up at night. And that means it gets hot, because there's no atmosphere to cool that side down. So that side of the moon is always warmer than the other side of the moon. And it's warm enough that we never thought that water could exist on that side of the moon. And what we're finding is that it's actually kind of suspended in the regolith, in the dirt on the moon, that there's water capable of existing in that space, which is such a weird thing. It's just not something we anticipated. And lo and behold, the universe is much more strange than we thought it was.
It's like Dippin' Dots in space.
Yeah, that's right. Which were invented for the moon, for those astronauts, at least according to the things I saw in the mall. Well, yeah, they said that there are permanent shadows in craters, because the moon does, like you said, the moon doesn't turn. So wherever the sun is, it's always, where it is. And then the shadows are permanent. And so the water lives in the shadows, which is kind of creepy. But so they said there's water, there's potentially a couple different kinds of water, but one of them is like water, like you said, in between the grains of the regolith, of the dirt on the surface, which is kind of fascinating. How accessible is that, though? I mean, it's like, do you have to scoop up like a square mile of the moon's surface to get a gallon of water? I mean, what did you guys see anything with that?
I think it's going to depend on how much water you need and how much is exactly there. That's going to, like it said in the article, they're going to have to actually go to the moon and send probes to the moon to really determine that.
Yeah.
But what is exciting about this is the implications for other exoplanets and like other bodies in the solar system, like just how much usable material is out there. And we'll talk about that with that asteroid story. But once we get out there and we know how to actually harvest these raw materials, these space colonies should be able to become self-sustaining at a certain point.
Why is it so important that stuff is in space as opposed to just dragging it off the planet?
Just because the cost of shipping things from Earth to other places, and the farther out you get, the harder it's going to be to get supplies from Earth to these other places. So if you start harvesting things from the moon, you can get to Mars, and then we can start using the resources on Mars, and so on and so forth, kind of hopping from planet to planet.
And it's also, it's cheaper to pull things, like if you can harvest something from the moon, it's cheaper to get it off the moon and off to another planet, because the gravity of the moon is so much less. So the delta V to actually like launch a rocket from the moon is much lower than from the Earth even. And, when we get to the asteroid story, we'll talk about, harvesting resources from an asteroid is even cheaper, because there's almost no cost of getting off the asteroid.
And with water, you can split that up and you get hydrogen and oxygen. So you can make your rocket fuel, you have breathable air. So it's more than just drinking water. Okay.
And like pulling a gallon of water off the surface of the Earth is going to be like 100 times more expensive than a gallon of water off the surface of the moon. I mean, that's the or a pound of anything. Like whatever you're taking.
Exactly. Even if you have to, and even if you're talking about the act of harvesting it from the moon, if you can just rake up a whole bunch of moon dust and process it out, you've got whatever the moon dust is, which we're pretty sure is mostly iron and other types of materials that we can use for construction. And you can separate the water out of that. That's dramatically cheaper, even if you have to go through a really complicated process, than having to launch it from the Earth and take it there.
You could probably, I mean, it's a little speculative here, but like giant moon Roombas that just vacuum up the surface and do the processing with unattended, perhaps. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting. So it's not aliens on the moon, but it is pretty cool when you think about the implications for 2024, the Artemis moon mission, and then beyond that to Mars and elsewhere. Well, when they're on the moon harvesting the water, they can be talking to each other on their 4G LTE phones by Nokia, apparently. So, because
built with the upgrade potential to 5G. That's what
yes, I think
that's the way they're planning
5G on the moon. That'll be the only place you'll be able to use your iPhone 12. So what we're talking about is this next headline, which is that Nokia has signed a contract with NASA to develop a wireless 4G network for the lunar surface, ultra compact, low power, and space hardened, which is important because space has lots of radiation and other stuff that can mess with things. There's not much in the way of obstacles to your towers, so the radio waves can travel a lot further, I would think. And they want to start putting stuff up there by 2022 and eventually make it upgradable to 5G when, like probably about the same time we get 5G ubiquitous here. I'm going to keep making fun of 5G. So very interesting. So what's the point? This isn't really for astronauts to talk to each other on the phone on the moon, right? What's the implication?
I mean, partially it's going to be the equipment communicating with each other, and you can get that instantaneous communication. Something that I think will be cool is if they're able to tie this into what SpaceX is doing with Starlink. So you have a swarm of satellites around Earth, and so there's always going to be satellites in the line of sight of the moon, and what the latency is going to be like between direct communications between Earth and the moon.
Right.
That'll be interesting because that's going to be delayed. That'll be delayed by quite a bit, just for the distance. So we'll have to have like tiers of satellites jumping between the Earth and the moon. And then I was thinking about the same thing though. I was like, okay, now, so if we set up a series of satellites that's always in range and able to jump the communications back and forth, you're looking at probably about like a 30-second to 50-second latency somewhere in there. That's
the straight line latency is under 3 seconds. So if you don't use repeaters, it's like within the Apollo era, it was about 3 seconds. Right. So it's not too bad even as it is. I mean, you can communicate with that. I mean, that's basically Skype, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes
you could use like direct lasers or something from the surface of the Earth to a receptor on the moon.
But you're not going to get any faster, right? I mean, light is light. That's the thing. So it's
going to cap out at a certain point.
Yeah. 186,000 miles per second.
And the interesting thing about the 4G on the moon is that it's going to, I like that they're thinking ahead in this sense that we're not going to be limited to one base. We're not going to be limited to one range of things that can be working all at one time. So you can have multiple robots out there all communicating on this 4G network. They're moving from cell tower to cell tower. It's also going to provide a better kind of GPS system for them. That's one thing that you can triangulate off the towers at that point. So it's got a lot of really interesting uses beyond just the cell phone ability that we use it for here. And you just go through and think, what do they use the phones for in CSI? What do they use the phones for in all the terrorist shows where there's so much more that you can do with these cell networks than just use your phone. It's just that's what we happen to do with it every day.
Right. Yeah, all that data that's going to be flying around. Well, I mean, think about it. I was talking before about like having moon Roombas doing automated processing of all that oxygen and all the regolith and all that. Well, these would need to be communicating with each other with the home base, and they would need a network for that. So this is just one piece of the puzzle for how to build it. It's so exciting to me that we're going to the moon in 4 years, guys, like 2024. Right. I mean, this is amazing. And then we're going to have a moon base that they're going to have there. I mean, this is super exciting. I mean, I get so upset with like all the 2020, the politics and all the COVID. And I'm like, yeah, but there's so much to look forward to if we survive that long, you know?
Well,
get off the plane.
Yeah, exactly. And we're already planning our Mars mission. They're already hiring astronauts for the Mars mission. So
right.
And training and getting them ready for that event when we're going in the 2030s. That's right. That's our stated goal and our aim.
I can't wait. I hope I live that long because I really want to see a man walk on or man or woman walk on Mars, because it will be. I mean, I'll be jumping out of my skin at how exciting that will be. I was 7 months old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, somewhere around there. So I don't remember it, or any of them walking on the moon. I don't remember. But so I really want to be able to see someone walk on the moon and someone walk on Mars. That's my big goal. All right. So speaking of going up into space, there's also news regarding SpaceX. So we had the Crew Dragon 2 mission, which was this past summer, where was the test flight of 2 astronauts going up to the space station. They stayed there for like a week or so, I think, something like that, right? Well, now they're getting ready to start doing the regular missions. They're preparing to send the next Crew Dragon up. This one's going to have 4 astronauts going to the ISS for 6 months. This is a big deal. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a full mission, basically.
Yeah, the last was just proof of concept. This is, okay, now we're serious. Let's get it up there and let's do something with it.
Yeah, they're targeting, last I saw was as of on Tuesday, they were saying November 14th was the launch date that they were planning for. They had a slightly delay because of, I don't know, some equipment issues they wanted to double check. But this is the promise of commercial spaceflight, right? That stuff not being operated by NASA per se and government bureaucracy. There is an impetus to get things done and get them done right, and get things up there. And that's what they're doing. I mean, all credit to the NASA's engineers over the last 60 years. I mean, phenomenal. But I'm so happy to see them really starting to, getting things going and rolling and getting stuff launched, and the real promise of regular, routine space flight.
Yeah.
And just how quickly they've gotten there.
Yeah.
That's been the amazing thing.
Yeah.
They've been able to iterate so fast. That's the lack of the bureaucracy that the government agency has to go through is a real help.
Right.
It's interesting though, because you see now why it's so slow sometimes, because that, you talk about the delays. They've been delaying a lot of these Starlink launches that they've been going through because it uses a very similar technology, and they've had just some hiccups on the launch pad, and it's not anything that they think is really dangerous. It's just that one of the thrusters is not inside of what they consider the optimal range, and by optimal they mean it's not even about safety at that point. It's just it's not exactly what they want it to be when it goes up. So you see that once you put a person in that craft, you start to be a lot more careful and a lot less cavalier about, let's just go ahead and launch and see what happens.
Right.
If we lose some lettuce, not a big deal, but if we lose a person, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah. It is pretty awesome because I've been watching on Disney Plus the National Geographic Right Stuff series, which is highly fictionalized. I mean, it's based on what really happened. But I've also been, as I'm watching it, going back and looking at articles and things about the actual stuff, and just how hard it was for them to just get a rocket to launch, the Mercury rockets, to get those to launch without blowing up on the pad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
to even get the capsule to work without blowing up.
Yeah.
They had the capsule out on the launch pad with nothing going on, and it still caught fire. So they've got, it was a big deal.
And I think we tend to forget just how amazing this technology is. Like when you watch those, the Dragons land synced up landing on the pads, like that's something straight out of science fiction.
It looks like CGI.
It's amazing.
Yeah, my eye says that's CGI, but it's not. It's real. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about our last space story, which is really cool. You alluded to this earlier. There is a Hubble telescope, still working. It has discovered a massive metal asteroid. It's called Psyche. That's one of the it's out of Greek mythology. it says it's worth way more than our global economy. I suppose it's like a giant chunk of a planet. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that it's. I mean, it's got special minerals in it, but it's just a chunk of iron the size of Africa, I think it is, or something. It's like massive. Or it's not that big. It's 140 miles wide, so but still, it's a giant hunk of iron. Yeah, it'll be worth a fortune. And they're all excited about it. So you was kind of saying, I think one of you were saying earlier that this is exciting. What's exciting about this hunk of iron in space?
You can build space settlements out of it.
Yeah.
Like what we were talking about earlier, where you don't have to ship all that from Earth. You can capture an orbit and you can just start mining off of it. You can build a base on it and mine off of it.
Yeah, you can do both. It's already iron. You just cut out the inside, sell that part, and you've got a wall now.
Yeah.
Right.
You got a structure.
Right.
Done.
Just don't bring any proto-molecules on board.
Yeah. I was gonna say, this takes us back to like talking about the belters and that whole category of things from the Expanse. Yeah, I think scientifically this is really cool because we don't know what the belt is. We don't know what the asteroid belt is, and so we have a lot of hypotheses, and the best reigning hypothesis is that it was a planet, and then that it just didn't survive the initial catastrophic creation of the solar system. And so Psyche is one of our best possible landing sites to determine what the interior of this planet may have been like. And so we can go and look at it and see what the interior of a planet is, because it's been kind of deconstructed for us.
Which they're planning to do in 2026, right? They've got a Psyche mission, unless they're going to go, no, we're not landing. Psych! Oh, sorry, just bad joke.
Psyche.
Psyche. Jack, were you going to say had something?
Yeah, something that, and this is kind of similar to your point, is when you see stories like this, we kind of tend to think that we know everything there is to know about our local neighborhood in the solar system because of the Voyager probes and everything. We have all these beautiful pictures, but there's still so much that we don't know, even about objects that are relatively close, like with the moon. Like, there's so much more to learn about that, and that's what's really exciting about stuff like this.
Right. And there's a reason why they tell us, like, this is worth 10,000 quadrillion dollars, which is a stupid, silly number because it's just impossible.
It's meaningless.
I mean, the global economy was $142 trillion. I mean, it's a meaningless number. If you dropped all that on, commodities on the market, it would devalue everything on the planet. So you can't, it's not like you can sell it. But the idea is, I think what they try to do, and it's kind of smart, is, look, the reason we're going to space is because there's a lot of great stuff in space. And if we can get it in space, we don't have to dig up our planet to get the same stuff. We don't have to dig up iron mines and do strip mining and all this awful stuff on this tiny blue marble that's very fragile. We'll just do it out there, and nobody cares if you could grind up half the asteroids in the asteroid belt, and that would be like 10,000 planet Earths. I mean, it's just like, you would never run out of the material. So it is important to go there and to spend the money to go into space because of there are tangible benefits to us here, not just philosophical benefits, which are real, and not just scientific benefits of we want to know, but there are also tangible benefits, which i.e. improving people's lives. So that it's really, I think it's important. I'd be curious to find out if there's more than just iron on it, like if there's stuff like gold or platinum or other rare materials that on Earth are relatively rare but are important for things like electronics and superconducting materials and all that sort of stuff that we could use to make technical and complex things in space. That would be really great.
There are a bundle of asteroids in the asteroid belt that are platinum that we assume are platinum because of the signature they give off. So
yeah,
there's a lot of valuable stuff out there, and the thing is I think people right now, we go back to this concept of launching from the moon. If we can get to the point where we have a launch site on the moon that is self-sustaining, that can create its own fuel, that can get a ship entirely ready from the moon, it's going to cost so much less to travel anywhere. And then once you move from that point, we start mining things, and then you can actually build a space station where it costs virtually nothing to start the ship off. All the fuel you're using is the fuel that gets you from point A to B. and you don't even have to worry about a launch at that point.
Right.
That's when we start really having a lot of power in space.
That will be.
And once we get the ball rolling on that, it's going to bring down the barrier to entry a lot.
Right.
Right. And because we're going to have, it's not going to just be a government agency, but will be corporations will probably be given franchises, mining rights, or whatever you want to call it, or at least they'll be cooperating with the government to establish moon bases where they can operate from, but they'll be private corporations. And so they'll have a profit incentive to do it as inexpensively as possible and to maximize shareholder value and that whole thing. That really drives speed and drives them out there. So, it's really interesting. I mean, there are dangers to being purely led by capitalism and profit, obviously, but frankly, I think it's better than being driven by bureaucracy and politics. So
right.
we'll see.
Well, and it avoids the disincentive of people saying, well, things are so messed up here, we should fix things here before we go other places. And it kind of gives light to that, where it's like, well, no, we can go other places and in doing that, fix things here.
Right.
So.
Right.
Like, I think people tend to forget that a lot of the technological advancements we have and the medical advancements we have came from people researching what to do in space.
Right. Try to survive in the most hostile environment possible led to a lot of technological advances.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Excellent.
And Velcro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Couldn't do without the Velcro. So
Vulcans invented that.
So all right, that's great. So that's our space news. We're going to keep covering space news. I love space news, and it's been too long since we talked about it. So we'll be back to talk about that again. But our next topic is a bit of a follow up. Guys, hold on to your hats. I know you're going to be shocked. Quibby is shutting down. That's right.
Oh no!
In case you didn't know, Quibby was the mobile-only video streaming service. It was only going to be on your phone. It launched by some of the biggest names in Hollywood with hundreds of millions of dollars, and blew all of that very quickly. It was only around for like 6 months, and it's gone. And frankly, we were talking about it when it first launched, and we all agreed, like, who is this for? Why was this made?
Right.
This is not going to survive. And I love being a genius because apparently we knew better than these guys. What do you guys think of this story?
It's completely unsurprising. I haven't even thought about Quibby in 6 months, which is how long it's been around. I think one of the big problems was a lot of their videos were vertical, which is a horrible format for any sort of like fiction. Like, I hate it when people record videos and send them to me vertical. I don't want to watch a story that way.
Yes, exactly. One of the things I saw, there was this guy, John Wick on Twitter, who is a writer, like a screenwriter, he says former screenwriter. And he was saying that Quibby's format of 10-minute episodes, it was they sold it as you could just it's like watching a YouTube video, and so every episode of a show is only 10 minutes long, and you're just getting a little bit there. And he said, no, that's a lie. This guy John Wick, he says, by playing credits between each act of a show instead of commercials, Quibby claimed that a 10-episode season was actually 40 low-budget, under 12-minute episodes, which allowed them to skirt the Screen Actors Guild union and the Writers Union minimums, so they didn't have to abide by the contracts. So it was a way of, as he says, a scab-based business model.
Yeah,
right.
What do you guys think? Do you think that's really what it was about?
I've heard that other places. I've heard that on NPR as well. I think NPR did a report where they talked about the fact that it allowed them to avoid the Screenwriters Guild issues.
Yeah,
and they didn't have to do advertising the same way that they're required to do advertising on TV. So there were a lot of really sketchy business decisions beyond just why are we even doing this?
Right.
I would wonder if they were even thinking this was going to survive that long, and if this was more just a let's make some money and then get out.
I'm not sure they actually made any money. I mean, they blew 100 and I forget what it was, 175 million dollars. I'd be surprised if they made anything. Or no, I'm sorry, $1.75 billion.
Oh,
Sorry. So I would be surprised if they won it, if they made any money off of it, except for maybe the people who got salaries out of it. I mean, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried to blame it on, it's the pandemic. It kept us from hitting our growth targets. But the fact is, I mean, we looked at the lineup of shows, quote unquote, that they were offering, and they were just universally like bad late night cable quality shows. Like just it's hard to do drama in 10 minutes at a time. So they had like weird game shows and weird talk shows, and just it was YouTube is already doing plenty well on its own. You can't undercut it with a paid service. It's just not going to work.
And it doesn't even make sense to use the pandemic as a reason for it to not work out, because all anyone was doing is sitting at home and watching videos.
Right. I'm scrolling my feed just like everybody else, just like we talked about in The Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. So, bye, Quibby. We hardly knew you. At least I hardly knew you.
Don't let the door hit you.
And don't let that be a lesson to everybody else out there with these things. So don't shovel these baloney services at us. Give us something of value, and we'll appreciate it.
You got to answer a need. Like if you're going to make a service, you really have to find a need and answer that need. And I think they were giving everybody benefit of the doubt.
Yep.
Right. I'm going to say that they thought they were answering this need that people had to be able to watch short spurts of things. And like I'm sitting waiting for the bus, I want to watch something, I watch it, I have a sense of completion, not that I have to pause in the middle of my show and come back to it. But the problem there is that we all just pause in the middle of our show and come back to it, and it doesn't bother us. It's not that big of an issue to just, okay, I'm going to pause my show here and I'll pick it up at home, because there's no need to like scroll back through or anything. Netflix already remembers where you were. Disney Plus already knows that's where you were in this particular show. Even if you go watch something else, you come back to it, it remembers where you were. So
that's right.
I giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, they had a neat idea that just really was not well thought through at all. Yeah,
well, and the technology was interesting. This idea that you could, turn the phone and it would give you a different view on the scene, but this is kind of like, remember when DVDs came out, like you'll have alternate versions of every scene where you could look from, and like all the filmmakers go, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. I just want to make a movie. Like, I don't want to have this weird stuff where we have to film the same thing from 3 different angles, and nobody ever did that. And so I think even if they'd survived, that would not been a long standing feature of the show. I mean, frankly, I don't really care. Like, show me your vision of the product. Don't make me have to be the director.
I would love to hear from somebody who did subscribe and used it at all, because I cannot imagine what it was like. Being in the midst of all this and then really enjoying a show and going, oh, well, that was really neat, and now the whole platform fails.
I literally don't know a single person who subscribed to Quibby.
Right.
I mean, that's probably part of it. I mean, and I'm not in the demographic, obviously, that they were aiming for. That's a much younger demo, but I just don't. I didn't know anybody. Frankly, most people didn't even know about it, despite all the advertising. All right, let's move on to our picks of the week. Jack, why don't you go first with your pick?
All right, keeping with the space theme of this episode, I'm going to suggest that people pick up a cheap backyard telescope if you've not done astronomy before. Specifically, I'm going to recommend the Celestron Powerseeker 127EQ. It's a nice little telescope that you can just set up. It comes with the tripod. It doesn't have auto tracking or anything like that, but you really don't need that for what this is for. You can look at different planets. You can look at the moon and see the craters in really good detail. You can even see some nebulas with it. I think it's got a 1,000 millimeter focal length and a 127 millimeter aperture. It's a nice, inexpensive backyard telescope for getting into that. And then once you do that, you can upgrade parts as you go. And right now is a really good time to get a telescope because Mars is the brightest it's going to be for a long time.
Cool.
I think it's a $169.95 on Amazon.
Yep. And I think they even have like a smartphone adapter so you can connect your phone to the eyepiece and take pictures through it. Which is cool.
Yeah, it comes with that.
Oh, this is really neat. I might have to get my in-laws to buy this as a Christmas present for my daughter who loves looking at the stars. So Really cool.
That's a great idea.
Excellent. Thomas, what about you?
So I'm keeping in the space theme too. I decided that if you don't know what SoundCloud is, it's a streaming app that allows people to upload pretty much any kind of music or anything that they want to. It's a really low barrier to entry for a lot of artists, so you can find a lot of really neat artists on there. But NASA has a SoundCloud, and this month they are putting together the scary sounds of our solar system. So it's obviously they don't put microphones on everything that goes out into space, but they can interpret some of the waves from some of the sensors that they have on the ships and satellites and things, and they can turn them into music. And so that's what they've done with some of these things. So as Voyager was passing through some of the electromagnetic pulses that are out there, they took sensor readings and they converted those sensor readings into what you would expect space to sound like, which is creepy and sort of mellow and theremin-y. And it is awesome. Definitely worth a listen. It's really cool. There's even some stuff on there from some of the rovers on Mars where they recorded earthquakes, and so you can hear Mars. You can hear the earthquakes that were occurring on Mars when they were able to record them.
That's awesome.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah,
that is cool. You play that for the kids on Halloween.
Exactly. It definitely makes a great Halloween soundtrack. Let me tell you, it's got all the creepiness to it, the really weird high pitched keening, and just about everything you'd expect from creepy space music.
Awesome. So my pick is not space themed, but it is something I've been using and enjoying. It's an adjustable laptop stand, but it's a really good one. It's called it's Lamicall notebook holder, and it's got this really big base and this really sturdy post, and it's all like steel. This is like solid. It's nice and heavy, so your laptop isn't going to fall over if you put it on it. If you type on it, even it's really steady. It's adjustable. It goes up and down, so it's got some height adjustment and angle adjustment. One thing I use it for is I put my iPad on it in its keyboard case, and then I use a bit of software on my computer, on my Mac. It's called Type 2 Phone, and it basically makes my Mac make a Bluetooth connection to the iPad, and I can type on my Mac's keyboard on the iPad for various things if I want it, because I run certain software on there that I don't want to run on the Mac because sometimes their Mac software stinks, like Discord. I'm looking at you, so it's this stand is really nice. And even if like I know there are people that they use it as at their desk, their laptop is their primary computer, but they have a separate keyboard and mouse. And so they have the laptop high enough so that it's the right ergonomic height. And this is a really nice laptop stand, really sturdy, really well made, and it's $60, which is pretty good for this price. So that's my pick.
I'd like to add to Jack's pick. If you end up getting a telescope, I recommend that you find a Barlow Lens for your telescope, because it doubles the amplitude of light that you can get in and allows you to see much more stuff. And it's the first purchase and should basically come with the telescopes. It just doesn't for whatever reason.
So does that have to come from the manufacturer for that telescope, or?
You just have to find one that fits your telescope. Okay. So you kind of look around for Barlow Lens and the name of your telescope and get it. Okay. But yeah, it's an addition. You slide your lens into the Barlow Lens, and it allows you to basically double what you can see.
Excellent.
So it kind of like awesome. 2x zoom.
Oh, cool. And Celestron is a big name in telescopes, so there's definitely going to be one for this one. Excellent. Good call. All right, so that's it from us. What do you think of our discussion today? We talked about Zoomtowns and the various space news and the demise of Quibby. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. You can find links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. If you can, we would really appreciate it, and it really helps a lot when you do this. If you could write a review in Apple Podcasts or one of the podcast directories where you get your podcast from, and then share the podcast with your friends. Let them know we're here and that this is a resource for them. We try to make this for everyone, the tech aficionados, but for people who are just interested in getting more use or better use out of their technology. Help us grow this community of listeners. We really do appreciate when you do that. Until next time, Jack Barazzini, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Tom.
Thomas Sinnerho, thank you as well.
It was a pleasure.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.